Thursday after Epiphany.
A reading from the first letter of St. John. Beloved, we love God because He first loved us. If anyone says, "I love God," but hates his brother, he is a liar. For whoever does not love a brother whom he has seen cannot love God whom he has not seen. This is the commandment we have from Him. Whoever loves God must also love his brother. Everyone who believes that Jesus is the Christ is begotten by God, and everyone who loves the Father loves also the one begotten by Him. In this way, we know that we love the children of God when we love God and obey His commandments. For the love of God is this, that we keep His commandments. And His commandments are not burdensome, for whoever is begotten by God conquers the world. And the victory that conquers the world is our faith. The word of the Lord.
The responsorial psalm, the response is, Lord, every nation on earth will adore you. O God, with your judgment endow the king, and with your justice the king's son. He shall govern your people with justice, and your afflicted ones with judgment. Lord, every nation on earth will adore you. From fraud and violence He shall redeem them, and precious shall their blood be in His sight. May they be prayed for continually. Day by day shall they bless Him. Lord, every nation on earth will adore you. May His name be blessed forever. As long as the sun His name shall remain. In Him shall all the tribes of the earth be blessed. All the nations shall proclaim His happiness. Lord, every nation on earth will adore you.
A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Luke. Jesus returned to Galilee in the power of the Spirit, and news of Him spread throughout the whole region. He taught in their synagogues and was praised by all. He came to Nazareth, where He had grown up, and went according to His custom into the synagogue on the Sabbath day. He stood up to read and was handed a scroll of the prophet Isaiah. He unrolled the scroll and found the passage where it was written, "The Spirit of the Lord is upon me, because He has anointed me to bring glad tidings to the poor. He has sent me to proclaim liberty to captives and recovery of sight to the blind, to let the oppressed go free, and to proclaim a year acceptable to the Lord." Rolling up the scroll, He handed it back to the attendant and sat down, and the eyes of all in the synagogue looked intently at Him. He said to them, "Today this scripture passage is fulfilled in your hearing." The Gospel of the Lord.
The first reading comes from the first letter of John, chapter 4, verse 19 to chapter 5, verse 4. This passage continues to insist upon the idea that we have to love, because love comes from God, and anyone who hates a brother is a liar, because you can't say that you hate your brother, but you love God. Remember, our faith has a vertical and a horizontal dimension. So we have to keep this commandment, loving God, and that means loving the Son of God who was sent by the Father. Remember, this letter is written against those heresies who would deny that Jesus is the only begotten Son of God. But also loving our brothers and sisters. Obviously, these heretics have become arrogant, have not loved their brothers and sisters. This author reminds us that that's part of who we are. How do we know that we're truly children of God? We obey the commandments. Now again, this is one of those verses that gives us an indication that the first letter of John might not have been written by the same author as the one who wrote the Gospel. In the Gospel, there's only one commandment, to believe that Jesus is the only begotten Son of God. Here we hear about commandments, and this is a corrective of a misunderstanding of the Gospel. In the Gospel, it says you have to believe that Jesus is the Son of God. What the author is trying to say is what St. Augustine said, love God and do what you will. Unfortunately, the people had been doing what they wanted and not really loving God. So by the time that the letters of John were written, maybe 10 or 15 years after the production of the gospel, the author has to talk about commandments. And whoever is begotten by God conquers the world. Now remember, the world is not created reality, but rather those things that oppose the love of God, that deny that Jesus is the only begotten Son of God. Those things are called the world because they're worldly. They're opposed to that which is heavenly. The Gospel is from Luke 4:14-22. Jesus enters the synagogue in Nazareth, and he opens the scroll which proclaims, "The Spirit of the Lord is upon me. He has anointed me to bring glad tidings to the poor," etc. Now this is a passage taken from Trito Isaiah. It's not really one of the songs of the suffering servant, but it's similar in tone to that. It speaks about the proclamation of liberation, and that's a major theme in the Gospel of Luke. Jesus has come to liberate us of our illness, of our possession, of anything that keeps us from loving God as we were intended to love God. In Luke, the very presence of Jesus causes salvation to dawn upon the earth. Luke's idea of salvation is one of realized eschatology. Heaven already begins here upon the earth. We don't have to wait till after we die to be saved. We're already saved. In fact, Jesus has come to proclaim a year acceptable to the Lord. That would be the Jubilee year, which occurred once every 50 years, when debts were forgiven, when slaves were set free, when property was given back to its original owner. It's a reordering of justice in the world, and Jesus' presence causes that. Now it's interesting, there is one verse that speaks about a time of vindication against our enemies in the passage in Isaiah. That's not quoted by Luke, because Luke is a bit of a Pollyanna. Jesus comes into the world and brings absolute peace. There's no divisions, or at least he de-emphasizes the importance of those divisions. That's something we'll see in Acts of the Apostles when he describes the early Christian community at the end of chapters 2 and 4 as an idyllic community in which everybody shared everything they had. They prayed together and they lived in harmony. Well, he closes the scroll and pronounces that the scripture passage is fulfilled in their hearing. Remember, he's proclaiming this in Nazareth, his hometown. And these people are astounded by what he's saying because they know him a little too well. In fact, the same account in the Gospel of Mark, in which Jesus preaches in the synagogue of Nazareth, results in their rejecting him, something they'll do later on in this chapter in a part that's not recorded today. And may God bless us.